This three-part tutorial provides guidance on general public licenses, or GPLs, which are a common license agreement used for open-source software. The first tutorial will cover an overview of open-source software. The second tutorial will provide guidance on general public licenses for open source and how they differ from proprietary software and the end-user license agreement. Finally, the third tutorial will cover the nuances of general public licenses. Let's begin by briefly reviewing the nature of open source software, which we will refer to as open source throughout these tutorials. Open source software can be defined as any software program that is developed and distributed under free software principles. Explaining these principles will be a major focus of this tutorial series. Unrestricted access to the software's source code is at the heart of the open source principles. Please refer to the tutorial series on intellectual property to learn the difference between source code and object code. Two organizations have been in the forefront of developing and managing open source. They are the Open Source Initiative, known as OSI, and the Free Software Foundation, or FSF. These organizations have established the governing principles for creating, distributing, enhancing, and using open source. For brevity, we will refer to these as development and distribution rules. Software products are intellectual property, or IP, because they have attributes similar to books, music, and art. They are all expressions of the mind that are published. Both open source and proprietary commercial software are IP owned by those who develop it. Copyright law protections are therefore available to both, allowing the copyright holder to control the use and distribution rights of the software. Many of the noteworthy differences between open source and proprietary commercial software are found in the ways that copyright law is used to define and enforce use and distribution rights. As you will see, open source uses copyright to preclude restrictions on software use and distribution, while proprietary companies use copyright to impose restrictions. Open source is usually developed by unaffiliated collaborators. This style of development and the rights to use the software are considered to be open. The human-readable source code of open source is made available to users by its publishers with few, if any, restrictions on use, distribution, and further development. Although open source is intellectual property that is owned by its developers, open source is usually developed by like-minded developers who believe that IP should not be licensed for profit, that its use or modification should not be restricted, and that its distribution should not be limited. These attributes, open development, relatively unrestricted source code distribution, and availability without license fees, are what distinguish open source from commercial proprietary software. The mechanism for documenting and enforcing the open source development and distribution rules is the license agreement entered into by open source users. One of the most common license types for open source is the GNU General Public License, or GPL. There are many other versions of open source licenses, but this tutorial will focus on the GPL. We will address the specifics of GPLs after further distinguishing open source licensing from proprietary software licensing in the next tutorial. Please refer to Parts 2 and 3 of the General Public Licenses tutorial series for more information.